The nation is mourning the deaths of several women and girls who were murdered by men.
Holding the steak knife that he had been using, he jumped to his feet and rushed at me.
That night when I put in my statement, one of the officers at the police station says, "Oh, you know what? We don't have the time for this."
We know the names of Uyinene Mkhechana, Leandre Jechels, Janika Mallo, Ayaka Gianni, and her 3 little siblings. But we also grieve with many others who have died at the hands of men.
There was physical abuse, verbal abuse, and emotional abuse.
Violence against women has become more than a national crisis. It is a crime against our common humanity.
South Africa has among the world's highest femicide rates. Married women are particularly vulnerable to abuse. And because of factors such as cultural and religious attitudes, leaving is seldom a viable option. Close to 70% of all female homicide cases are acquitted, which means, more often than not, perpetrators get away with killing women in South Africa. This is Him or Me, a podcast series on the experiences of women who have faced abuse and their experiences with the South African criminal justice system. I am your host, Leletu Tonisi.
I, the undersigned, am an adult female person. I am an accused person in these proceedings. I am legally represented and all my rights, including the right to silence, were explained to me. I have, out of my own free will, elected to make this statement. I intend to plead not guilty to the charges mentioned in the charge sheet.
This is the story of a married woman who was wrongfully accused of killing her abusive husband. According to multiple media reports, the couple's marriage was a very tumultuous one. Senior multimedia journalist at the Wits Justice Project, Sumeya Gasa, compiled this report.
In this particular case, we will call the woman involved, Ketiwe, and her husband, Jeffrey. Her story is one of the many we came across during research for this podcast series. Ketiwe got married to Jeffrey in the mid-1990s. It's not clear just how bad things were during the early stages of the relationship, but it has been described as toxic. Jeffrey often abused Ketiwe emotionally, physically, and sexually. He was also infidelious, and blatantly so.
The abuse grew increasingly worse over the years. On one reported occasion, Jeffrey raped Ketiwe, and this led to their divorce in 2007. But that wasn't the end of their life together.
In 2011, tragedy struck their family. One of their children drowned to death. Now, the mourning period that ensued after the incident brought the estranged couple closer together. Eventually, they decided to get back together and renewed their marriage.
According to legal records, Ketiwe said the second time they got married was not as bad as the first. But Jeffrey subjected his wife to abuse and infidelity again.
Ketiwe put up with the infidelity but began rethinking the decision to stay with Jeffrey. Over and above his inability to stay faithful to her, the abuse of the past started to resurface. She often told her family and close friends that she was tired of the suffering that Jeffrey constantly put her through. At some point, she even considered leaving their marital home and distancing herself from Jeffrey's family. It's not clear just how long she felt this way, but in September 2016, some intruders allegedly came into the couple's home and shot Jeffrey just as he was preparing to have his breakfast before leaving for work. Now, it's important to note that Jeffrey held a position in the local government structures and often told Ketiwe there were people who wanted him dead because of the political power that he yielded. After Jeffrey was shot, Ketiwe tried to get him medical attention.
Unfortunately, Jeffrey did not survive the shooting. Ketiwe became the prime suspect as the police speculated that she had ordered the killing of her abusive husband, but she consistently denied any involvement. Her transcript reads as follows.
I, the undersigned, am an adult female person. I am an accused person in these proceedings. I am legally represented and all my rights, including the right to silence, were explained to me. I have, out of my own free will, elected to make this statement. I intend to plead not guilty to the charges mentioned in the charge sheet. The basis of my defense to the charges is on the following basis. I am aware that on the 14th day of September 2016, at about 6:30 a.m., I was at my house with the deceased person in this matter, and we were both preparing to go to work. I was in the kitchen when I heard the deceased shouting. At the time, I thought he was shouting off some cats that occasionally intruded into our yard. A while later, I heard a bang. I cannot recall whether it was one bang or more. I heard the deceased shouting that he had been shot and that I must hurry to take him to hospital. I may have waited for a few seconds in the kitchen as I had to satisfy myself that the danger was out of the way. On coming out, I saw the deceased crawling from the main bedroom into the garage, and I went into the bathroom where I called out the name of our tenant to hastily come into the main house. It took some while for the tenant to arrive, and when she did, she was in the company of another woman who I initially thought to be a nurse, as she felt the pulse of my husband and reported that there was still some pulse. After that, we decided to transport the deceased to the hospital ourselves.
It seems because the extent of the abuse was known by the couple's network of friends and family, the knee-jerk reaction was to assume that Ketiwe was involved in the killing of her husband.
I must state that the state is relying on the fact that there had been primer residue that was detected on my hand and the jacket that I had on in the morning of the incident, which I explained during bail application that I could have had that transmitted from the deceased to me, as there was no other way that I would have acquired the same. I do not know whether the state examined and tested the body of the deceased and or that of the other persons that assisted me in carrying the body of the deceased into my vehicle for some traces of primer residue. I must mention that the deceased had a tendency of first lifting up the garage door and roll the gate wide open on each day that he was preparing to go to work, and on the said day, the garage door was open on one side, and it could have been easy for anyone wishing to access our home to gain entry into the house via the garage door. I knew that the deceased had many enemies in his work as a member of the regional executive committee of a political party, and other enemies, which he advised me about and also advised his employer. I did not think much about these threats in the life of the deceased, and I did not kill the deceased, nor was I in possession of any firearm and ammunition as the state alleges.
After 2 years of court hearings, Ketiwe was acquitted of the charges leveled against her. According to the judge that presided over the case, the evidence presented before the court overwhelmingly proved Ketiwe's innocence.
Not only do women face abuse at the hands of their partners, but society too. Social stigma follows victims of ongoing abuse and survivors. This, in turn, can prove detrimental to the victim or survivor, as it often serves to silence them against their abuser. And because of South Africa's numerous cultural and religious contexts, women who dare to even report abuse perpetrated against them are further stigmatized. These women are seen as treacherous to the traditional family structure. Often, in the event of their abusive spouse's death, even by natural causes, the widow is often blamed for the death regardless of the circumstances. Whether women stay or leave, return to their abuser, the jeopardy of their situation is ever potent. There is the danger associated with leaving an abusive partner. Sometimes that could lead the abuser to kill his estranged partner. The logic that if I can't have you, no one will, is ever too common. Even when women successfully leave abusive relationships, research shows that there is a lot of guilt and shame associated with surviving an abusive relationship. This is Him or Me, a podcast series on the experiences of women who have faced abuse and their experiences with the South African criminal justice system. I'm your host, Leletu Tonisi. The Wits Justice Project investigates human rights abuses and miscarriages of justice related to the criminal justice system. You can get in touch with us by visiting our website at www.witsjusticeproject.co.za or Wits Justice Project on Facebook and on Twitter. Special thanks to Boipelo Hlapane for providing narration services for this episode.